Okay, so you're very welcome, everybody, to our webinar this afternoon. From quite a bright enough Limerick. I just actually, as I speak, there's some rain on the window, but it has been quite a nice day here. You're very welcome very welcome virtually to the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance here at the University of Limerick. And we're delighted to welcome our panelists here today to share with us the fruits of their many years' experience of working with archives of various kinds. And also to say that we're delighted that this seminar in some ways is a precursor to a conference that we're organising next June with the Traditional Song Forum, a very prominent organisation, and we have two members of that organisation here today as well as a representation from ITMA and the Inishowen International Ballad Commission. So welcome everybody, and I'm going to hand you over now to the chair today and leave you in the very capable hands of Cara O'Brien, who is a wonderful singer herself and also completing a PhD in the area of traditional song.
Lovely, thank you, Sandra. So welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about archives, and we're going to be talking about the sort of unique challenges that oral culture and oral tradition can present both to archivists and to researchers. And we're going to be looking at that from several different angles, fortunately. We're delighted to be here with our panelists today. We have Steve Roud, who is probably best known for the Roud Index, which many of our researchers will be familiar with, but is also the author of a number of books himself. We also have Martin Graebe, who is a ballad scholar and a traditional song scholar, and also the author of several books, which hopefully he'll be mentioning. And Steve and Martin are both, as Sandra mentioned, representatives of the Traditional Song Forum, which is partnering with the conference. And then also we are delighted to have Grace Toland, who is here as a representative both of the Irish Traditional Music Archive and also of the Inishowen Traditional Singers Circle, who will also be involved in the conference as well. So I think we will turn it over to the panelists, and I think Steve, are you starting off?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Cara. I can see on the list of participants how many people we've got, but I don't know you all. So I apologize if you know all of this stuff that I'm going to tell you already. But somebody has to start off, and it's me. I'm going to show some slides of some of the websites that there we go, that I'm going to be mentioning. I won't talk about each one of them, and certainly I won't be showing you how to use them. But here's the first point of what I'm going to say. If you need tutorials and you want to know more about them, then ask, because that's what archivists and librarians do. So in this session, I'm talking primarily about historical material. Grace will be talking about current and future performance later on, but these are really part of the same thing. What gets recorded and performed today becomes the archive of the future. Today is tomorrow's history. No, today is tomorrow's yesterday, I was meant to say. And today, when we use the word archive, we're using it in a somewhat generic sense, meaning collections of material and information. So we are including libraries and museum collections and other repositories, as well as archives per se. I'm trained as a librarian, and I regard archivists and curators as my professional brothers and sisters. But like all siblings, we squabble amongst ourselves. And from a user experience point of view, there can be quite a few differences. If you spill your coffee on an in-print book, no real harm is done. But if you take it anywhere near a unique manuscript, you might be wrestled to the floor by the staff. The book you want might well be on the open shelf, but a manuscript has to be collected from secure storage, therefore ordered in advance. A sound recording needs equipment, and so on. And I'm talking here both about physical repositories and their online presence. We're all scrambling to get material online, but there are vast amounts of still to be digitized, which can only be seen in person. And the advantage there with a visit to the library or the archive is the Ad experts on tap to help you. Online, you're on your own or in the hands of Google. When I was at library school 40 years ago, it was drummed into us that our prime concern is to understand the needs of our users, and for users read customers and clients, etc. What do our users want from our materials? How can we tailor our services to meet those needs, and so on? And this advice is as true today as it was then. But today I want to examine the other side of the coin, what the users can bring to the table. The way to achieve the perfect fit between users' needs and professionals' activities is for the latter, the professionals, to be better at their jobs, yes, but also for the users to be more skilled in finding information. And this means looking at the subject you're interested in from an information point of view and taking some responsibility in how you go about finding it. We all need to be more information savvy, and relying on the Google type search just doesn't cut it. Ironically, we're the victim of our own success. There are hundreds of thousands of songs already online, but the more we put up, the harder it can be to find the one you want. Our field of folk song studies, like most fields, has a unique blend of characteristics. It is interdisciplinary, it is historical and contemporary, and its materials come in many physical formats. We have published and unpublished sound recordings, manuscripts written by collectors, manuscripts written by singers, books, journals, printed ephemera such as broadsides and chapbooks, photographs, and so on. And our sources can be created yesterday or be 500 years old. An archive might specialize in one or more of these formats, but not necessarily all. The British Library's Sounds website, as its name implies, and the Keister Riches project at the School of Scottish Studies both specialize in sound recordings. So don't go to them for manuscripts or for material from before the invention of sound recording. The Vaughan Williams Memorial Library online site has oodles of manuscripts, some broadsides, but only 2 sound collections so far. Irish Traditional Music Archive has all these formats. University College Dublin Dukas site has a unique collection of thousands of songs and some other stuff noted by school children in the 1930s, written out in exercise books. It pays to be aware of these differences in formats and where they might be. Our geographical boundaries are also blurred. England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, in alphabetical order, all have their own song traditions, of course, but they also have a huge area of overlap. A short time ago, I was looking for a book song called The Dublin Lasses, and I found it in a book called The English Musical Repository, which was published in Edinburgh. The online full English project at the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library, already mentioned, includes thousands of songs collected in the Appalachians by Cecil Sharp and hundreds collected in Scotland and the USA by James Madison Carpenter. Irish Traditional Music Archive has a lot of Newfoundland material. The National Library of Scotland website has hundreds of English printed broadsides. Don't be too parochial in your search strategies. And then there are subject and genre-based differences to take into account. Just last week, well, no, 2 weeks ago now, I received an inquiry from a woman compiling a book of country dances. She wanted to include some historical notes on the tunes. The dance in question was A Hunting We Will Go, and there's a Wikipedia page which confidently states that the tune was composed by Thomas Arne for the Beggars' Opera in 1777. So we started looking into it, and yes, it was the tune of a song before it was a dance. So that led us back through folk song to theatre songs of the early 18th century. So the point I'm trying to make is that a dance inquiry led to an instrumental tune, which led us to a folk song, and finally to a theatre song. Each of those related genres had different resources, different experts, different repositories. And incidentally, Wikipedia was completely wrong. It had the date, the composer, and the play wrong, and it had mixed up two different tunes which have the same title. So to finish off, a few practical points of advice for honing your research skills. Number one, don't be frightened of archives or archivists. Many people find them daunting, but get in and get researching. That's what they are for, and you're a grown-up. You can do it. Number two, tailor your search strategy to your current needs and think about it. Sometimes you're a beginner, sometimes an expert, sometimes tunnel vision is appropriate, sometimes a scattergun approach is better. Be an information grown-up. Get into the habit of using the advanced search facility and don't rely on the simple search box. I say this all the time, but nobody takes blind bit of notice. We know that editors like to use song titles for their books. So a search for the song The Foggy Dew in the simple search box will bring up 100 or so unrelated songs published in the book of that name. Search for Roud 1974, and you might get everything with a Roud number collected or printed in 1974. The advanced search takes no extra time and allows you to narrow your search right from the start. Find me The Foggy Dew as a song title. Number four, learn and use the built-in tricks for making your search more specific, such as putting phrases in double quotes to search for exact wording, or using an asterisk to truncate words. Five, look for ways of narrowing your initial search or filtering your results by physical format or other criteria that you actually have in your head. I only want sound recordings. I don't want American versions. Again, the advanced search will help you there. Teach yourself to use catalogues and indexes. They are there to help you find what you need, but you'll be amazed at how many people spend their time browsing blindly instead of using the tools provided to help them. And number seven, and finally, get plugged in by joining organizations like the Traditional Song Forum and discussion lists like Trad Song, Tunes Research, Ballad List, and so on, where you can meet like-minded people and ask questions, a sort of folk song research dating app. So here endeth the lesson from the librarian's point of view. I think Martin is going to talk about being a user. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Brilliant, Steve. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
I did, just before we hand things over to Martin, I did just want to pop in. I forgot to mention, we will be taking questions at the end. So jump in and pop them into the Q&A function down there at the bottom, and we'll be working our way through those once we get finished with our panelists' presentations. So I will hand things over to Martin now.
Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Steve. I've been interested in folk songs since I was a teenager and started to perform in public in my early 20s. At first, I was singing mainly contemporary folk songs, but after a while, I became more interested in traditional song. I was then living in Devon and began to study the collection of songs made by Sabin Baring Gould there. I made a few visits to see his manuscripts in Plymouth and began to compile a catalogue of his songs and singers. When we discovered a previously unrecognised hoard of material in 1989, this work mushroomed, and I accidentally became an expert on Baring Gould and his song collection. That led to a book about Baring Gould, and having got the taste for it, work on other collectors of traditional song. Now, my day job was working in research and development in the food industry, so I had some transferable skills that helped greatly in researching folk song. When I retired in 2006, I was able to focus fully on that research and to use what I discovered in my writing and performance. I'd already worked in several archives by then, but retirement, and it has to be said a pension, made it possible to visit more. So let's start up my presentation and I'll tell you some of my experiences. There we go. Right, so the first question to answer is, what am I trying to do with my research? There are three main objectives. The search for material to develop my repertoire as a singer, to find material on a specific theme for a show or talk, which will often go beyond the songs and delve more into context. And in recent years, that's morphed into deeper research that for the books and the articles. What I'm looking for to reach those categories, those objectives, falls under three main Try again. That's it. What I'm looking for to reach these objectives falls under three main headings. Unsurprisingly, I want to find songs, words, and music. I'll look for biographical information about the men and women who sang those songs. And then I will look for the contextual information provided by the collectors who heard them from those singers. Apart from my personal library, the place to find this material is in the archives, either those found in buildings or those online. Now, I sympathise with people who find libraries and archives scary places. The first time I went to Cecil Sharp House, I was too nervous to do more than look through the door of the library. I drew up a list the other day of 35 libraries, archives and collections that I've visited. The only truly scary one was the Cape Town archive, which was guarded by large men with guns. I'm using the term archive, but I should perhaps be talking about repositories. The next slide contains a very broad generalization of the three main types of repository that concern us. Very generally speaking, libraries hold books, archives hold papers, and collections hold works or artifacts. Many repositories will fall into more than one category. The Vaughan Williams Memorial Library, for example, falls into all three categories, since it not only has a large quantity of manuscripts as well as its books, but also has a small collection of artifacts related to folk song and dance. Each of these establishments is staffed by people, many of whom are experts on the materials in their charge. And I've found that the great majority have wanted to be helpful and that they are in themselves a valuable resource. But there are important differences in their jobs which a user needs to be aware of. Now, here again, I am generalizing quite wildly. The key role of a librarian is to help users to get the information they need, while the key role of the archivist is to ensure that the material in their care is kept safe. And the key role of a curator is to create a good display. But the reality is that most will have some element of each of these roles in their actual job. The growth of the internet has impacted the role of the libraries, archives and collections just as it has other areas of our lives. There's now a huge amount of information online, and that amount is growing all the time. Online catalogues, digitized manuscripts, and photos of artifacts are now part of the work of many of these institutions. So the question arises, do we actually need to go to a building, or can we find what we want online? For me, at least, the answer is that I need both. I'm pretty good at ferreting out information from online sources, he said modestly. But the reality is that there's still a lot of stuff that is just not online. As an example, I've been studying Doreen Senior, who worked with Helen Creighton in Nova Scotia. Many of her papers are in the Devon History Centre, where I can get access easily. But the letters and other important items are in Helen Creighton's papers in the Nova Scotia Archive in Halifax, and they've not been digitised. So far, I've made 3 visits to Halifax and was due to make another last year, but COVID put a stop to that and temporarily, I hope, to the project. So let's talk a little about visiting an archive. There's work to do before you go. And the first thing is to make sure that the catalogue that the items you want are actually there. Book your visit and arrange for the items that you want to be available. Make a note for yourself of the items that you've requested and the information that you're hoping to get. Put your kit together thoughtfully. There may be restrictions on what you're allowed to take into the archive or to use while you are there. You'll almost certainly need a pencil. Most archives won't allow you to use a pen. And don't forget the mains lead for your laptop. When you arrive, you can collect the material you're going to look at. Now keep a record of what you're seeing as you go along. You might want to photograph items that you want to work on at home, but this isn't always allowed, and if it is, you'll probably need to pay for a permit and to make a list of everything that you photograph. You might want to transcribe from items either on your laptop or on paper. And finally, before you leave, check that you have seen everything that you actually had on your list. If you have a lot of transcription to do, you may want to enlist the help of someone else. Sian often travels with me and either works on another item or transcribes something I need, and that ensures that we get the maximum value for the day. And if you've gone on a long journey, that's pretty important. When you get home, now this is the section where you should do as I say rather than as I do. I am still learning from my failures. When you get home, write a report for yourself on what you've done. You will thank yourself for it in the future. Check and label any photos and file your work carefully. But now you've got it, you can use it. And you can also start to plan the next steps and the next visit, if any. I'm going to finish my little bit with an example. This is a manuscript page from the Alfred Williams collection that I've been working on, and it's a song, The Sailor and the Farmer's Daughter, as collected by Williams from John Pillinger, an agricultural labourer and army pensioner who he heard at Down Amney in Gloucestershire. I included this in my recent book, The Forgotten Songs of the Upper Thames, and dug into the song's history so that I could write a note about its origins. The original is in the Wiltshire and Swindon archive, but an image of it is also on the VWML website. Now, the text of the song sung by John Pillinger is very similar to that of broadsides printed early in the 19th century, often under the title The Constant Lovers. The example here is a broadside by Catnach of London, and you can take my word for it that there's a strong correlation with Pillinger's version, excepting that Pillinger didn't sing verses 2 and 5 of the broadside. The story is about money, and the sailor's mother is threatening to disown him if he marries the farmer's daughter because she thinks that she doesn't have any. The son reminds her that she was a servant when his father married her, and that he raised her up to her present wealthy state. The song ends with the young sailor announcing that he would marry her, even if his mother disowned him, and they dress up in their best clothing so that she looks like a lady and ride off on horseback to the mother's house, where she is so impressed that she says this lady can marry his daughter. Of course, the farmer comes in and gives the game away by handing over a dowry of £200 and says, "That's my girl." But there's something odd at the bottom of Catnach's broadside. Let's bring it up. "So the constant lovers got married and had an excellent fat duck for dinner." That joke doesn't appear in other printers' versions, even though they have nearly identical words. And I believe that Catnach was acknowledging that this is in fact a parody of an earlier song, something that was quite common at the time. And that broadside can be found on the Bodleian Library's Ballads Online site. This, though, is the earliest version of the song that's been found to date. And that doesn't mean that there isn't an earlier one, just that we haven't found it yet. And it's in a London chapbook, Captain Barber's Gallant Behaviour, dated 1773. And note that instead of living on the Isle of Man, the lady lives in the Wild of Kent, which is sort of semantically cognitive, I suppose, but it's a bit of a stretch. The title page gives the name of the ballad as The Sailor's Courtship, and it has 28 8-line verses divided into 3 parts, which are described on the title page. The later broadsides and John Pillinger's song are a succinct précis of parts 1 and 2. But it's only in part 3 that the story is resolved by the farmer producing enough for the dowry and promising the lad the farm, so that he doesn't have to go to sea anymore. And that's when the girl dresses up in her fine clothes, etc. Now, it's possible that some of you may be thinking, that song sounds familiar. If that's so, perhaps you're remembering the version sung by Dominic Behan in the 1960s, which was an outrageous parody of the parody. It was also recorded by Noel Murphy. I should have said that my research source for Captain Barber was the English Echo. What is it? English
18th century on
English 18th century collection online. That's it. And my research sources for Dominic Behan was mainly Norfolk, and the other was Spotify, both of which I find very valuable tools for researching songs. I like the simplicity of John Pillinger's version and plan to add it to my repertoire because Williams didn't collect tunes. I'll be using one that I've heard the song sung to elsewhere, and that leads me to my final point. I have 2 hats. The first is that of a researcher and writer, and I try to adhere to academic standards of accuracy and probity when I'm writing and talking with that hat on. As a performer, however, it's often necessary to change or arrange a song for performance, and I always try as far as possible to make it clear which hat it is that I'm wearing. So that completes my section. Thank you very much, and I'll hand you back to Cara.
Thank you, Martin. That was fabulous. That was brilliant. And I think we will move right on into our final panelist, which is Grace Toland. And then we'll take questions at the end. Grace, take it away.
Karen, lovely to see everybody. Well, the people that I can see, and welcome to Inishowen. So I'm speaking to I suppose the most northerly geographic point in the country, and it's just getting nicely dark here outside. I am here with a couple of hats on. There's talks about hats and lots of archive. I see on both presentations so far, lots of views of archives. So I'm going to wear the 2 hats. One is that from Inishowen, talking about the work of the Inishowen Traditional Singers Circle and our work as in community archiving of songs and what's happening there. And then my other role which is working with the Irish Traditional Music Archive in Dublin, where I work remotely here from Inishowen. And I suppose what I want to do is kind of talk about the relationships that you can have with an archive, because I've dealt with archives in so many ways now as a user. I'm archived, which is an awful thing to say, that now you are archived. But I've created archives, I've been involved in them. So, and this is all open to all of us. So what I'm just going to do is switch to my presentation. So if you all hum among yourselves there for a second. I'm just going to talk a wee bit about this idea of relationships with archives and how they can change and move depending on what you're doing, the time of your life, and different ways that this can change. But it can be a constant, because I believe archives, we are the archives, and it's up to us to help create them and to be part of the movement, and also to advocate and support the work of archives and the funding. The ways that I think that I have been, and that I'm sure many people have been, is one as, first of all, as the user, and we've had great advice on being on both sides from Steve and Martin on being a user of an archive. And just for examples here on these two screens, there's Cara, who, when she was diligently working in the Irish Traditional Music Archive, we took a photograph of her in the reading room there. And the person above her is Aideen Barry, who's a visual artist who's working on a piece on Edward Bunting, and she's actually perusing Bunting's first printed, Edward Bunting's first printed work, which we hold a copy of, 1796-97, a little bit of debate over the date. But Aideen is working as an artistic response to Edward Bunting, and that piece is actually going to be shown in Limerick, starting in the Limerick City Gallery of Art on the 16th of December. So you're going to see that archives have users in so many different ways, not just singers. And I love the idea that this is what we want. We want people to respond to archives as a user in so many different ways. One is a researcher. That's one way of looking at it. The other is looking at yourself, and I'm just going to pop on here, the researcher, one as a creative user of archival material. And I think Steve touched on that. My work, I suppose, for me personally, is how I can make historical material, and that can be, you know, songs from ballad sheets, songs from earlier printed materials, old recordings. How can I make them relevant to contemporary performance? And that's about the other. So what you can have that role. The other one is pure absolute enjoyment. So this is one of the things, I know there was a great, there are times when you go to archives with a list and with all the things that Martin talked about. I'm a great believer in going absolutely with no other intention but to enjoy yourself and to browse and to keep looking and to go off in tangents and not really know where you're going to start, begin or end in the whole thing. And I find sometimes that the serendipity of going to an archive is what opens up lots and lots of new ideas and ways to go. So instead of a duvet day, I would say have an archive day. So go to them, don't be afraid. I know even for the Irish Traditional Music Archive, we have a very big black door at the front. Don't worry about it. Once you press that button and go in, it's a very warm and welcoming place. So when you are visiting, remember that you can just sit and listen. The Irish Traditional Music Archive is absolutely a reflection of what has been printed, collected, and made available about Irish traditional music, as much as they can cram into that lovely big 5-story building. So you have an opportunity to listen, to watch, to view. The other ways you don't, as we've seen, there are so many archives now where you have the ability to sit and look from your own desk. And what I'm going to do is as I move away from this presentation, I'm just going to go online to the archive just to kind of show you the sort of the breadth of what's there. There aren't enough hours in the day, days in the week to go through all the material that's available online. But I think start off with thinking that you can enjoy it, you can use it, and you can research. The other role that I've had, and I'm sure many people will have, is about generating material for an archive. So there are so many people with expertise and knowledge at local level about individuals, about family members, about their community. So the onus actually is on you and me to put material into an archive. I'm just looking at this poster that you can see here on the screen, and that's from an event that was held in 1990 in Gartahorp called Fleadh na Man. And the only memory now that exists from that event is that poster, because it was kept and donated to the archive. But there is so little, it was never recorded. It was kind of just well, there were two of them, two Fleadh na Mans. But it's so important that if you have small bits of information that are local, that are important about your community, that are important about music, song, and dance in your community, be the person who starts noting that. You don't have to be trained to be an archivist to do this kind of work. You just have to be curious, feel a sense of responsibility maybe towards your community, and you have to volunteer. Lots of the work that I do with Inishowen Traditional Singers Circle especially is all volunteer work. And that's about finding like-minded people who want to preserve, collect, organise and make accessible exactly what the Irish Traditional Music Archive does, but we do it at a community level. And I would really, really like people to start thinking about how they can contribute to something like the Irish Traditional Music Archive by preparing and by collecting material. But that needs a wee bit of thought and advice before you do it. And that kind of advice is available from ITMA. But I'd like to tell you just a wee bit of our own experience in Inishowen. So what we've done is the most important thing is making the decision to look around and record and to document people. There's so much good equipment there now. You can do this by just actually making that first step of looking around you in your own community and saying some things are at risk. At risk is a term that can be used about physically, about material just deteriorating or not being able to be played back again. But there are also people and their repertoires and what they're doing are at risk. So that's what happened in our community in the Inishowen Peninsula. Jimmy McBride just looked around, found out that the repertoire of the song community around us was at risk because they had not been written down. No one had actually asked the question, do you have songs? Are you there? It was known people sang. So it was all built on the actual doing. So if you've any thoughts on people in your community or songs that you've heard or not heard again or whatever, or people, start asking questions, start writing down names. You may never get recordings, but start thinking about recreating a picture of what the musical soundscape of your community was. And then think about where will that be contributed to. Now, I can't say the Irish Traditional Music Archive can't take everything that everybody creates, but there are lots of ways that you can document yourself, but you will need advice on putting it together. Look at your local archives, look at universities within your community, places that might be interested in taking this original material. So you can be a user, creative reuser, and a generator. The other thing that I really would like you to think about is being an advocate for archives. Archives are expensive. They take money to run. We're talking about the need to digitize more so that there's less travel needed between different places, that we can use material, but that all is a cost. So first of all, visit the archive, any archive, but let people know about it. Share that piece of information on your social media. I am going to an archive. Take a picture of it. Put yourself up out there. Also, embed, if you in creative reuse, I would ask you to embed something that you've sourced in an archive in your repertoire. I do it all the time. Martin was talking about it as well. You've got to please use the material that's there. You don't have to look for everything all the time. Take one thing that you really like and just say, I am going to use that again, and acknowledge your source. Say that you got it from an archive. Say you got it from a recording. Don't be worried that you have not got, when we were in prep for these events, I said, your granny can be the archive. You know what I mean? So what you're saying is you have an absolute opportunity to delve into the hundreds and hundreds of singers that are available through the multiple archives across the world, including the Irish Traditional Music Archive. So you don't need go gluing all the time. You just need from the archive or from a recording. The things are sitting there waiting to be learned. And then like it, tweet it, share it, talk about archives. Talk about the people you met, talk about the songs you're learning and where you're getting them from. Taking me back then, I just want to hop, if we've a couple of minutes, I just want to hop on to the Irish Traditional Music Archives website just to talk a wee bit about the resources there that you might find useful when you're, as a user, a creative user. I want you to advocate, and also as a researcher. So if you just bear with me 1 second, I'm just going to share my screen again. And there's nothing like a nice blank screen to get us all going. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the main page. So if you open the Irish Traditional Music Archives website, you're going to see that there are thousands now of digital objects that you can access freely from the Irish Traditional Music Archive. And the homepage changes, every couple of days, kind of bringing out new material, new things that are going on. So just even as a snapshot here, what the kind of material that you can delve into. I have to say that I'm very happy to have been working with Catherine Ann Cullen on putting her piece of work on Joseph Sadler's ballads, the 19th century Dublin newspaper seller and ballad singer and ballad writer, as available as a blog online. And that's using material from the Irish Traditional Music Archive, exposing the context of it. So those ballad sheets were in our ballad sheet collection online, and Catherine Ann has given them life and given them context by writing about it. That's available online. The Donal O'Martin collection, images, lots and lots of images. Donal O'Martin was a photographer based in County Cork. Again, within his collection, lots and lots of images of singers. Jesse Smith down in the bottom, while a fiddle player, is what I'm bringing across as he's part of a series called Drawing from the Well at Etna, which is really about creative reuse, where professional musicians, singers and dancers are asked to come to the archive or to look at collections and to expose them and create material in a new way. So if we jump on to that section, Drawing from the Well, sorry, this is quite slow loading, you're going to see that these are all various musicians, singers and dancers who have worked on material. Derry Farrell, Rady Pete, Brian McGlynn. These are, and I would also actually ask you to listen as well to Martin Hayes talking about the value of using archives. He is very, very succinct and clear about the value in listening to archives and how you've got to train your ear coming in to listen in a new way. Unfortunately, at the minute, we're having an upgrade of the Irish Traditional Music Archives website, and the Inishowen Song Project is down at the minute while that link is, or that work is being done. But I don't know if you can actually still find out what's in the archive, what's in that project by using the Wayback Machine. So the Wayback Machine is an archive of websites. So this is what the Inishowen Song Project looks like online. And in it, there are, about 110, 20 singers in it and over 600 songs. So a wealth of material to delve into. The same with the Goleen Song Project. The work of Hugh Shields collecting, Eddie Butcher, all online. All this material, again, all ready to be used, to be searched. And again, this is just from your own home. This can be done. It was mentioned about the Newfoundland project online again. That was a collection collected in Newfoundland in the 1970s, 1980s. Again, wealth and wealth of material. So this is time every now and again, just dip in. So as well as taking research for specific projects, turn on some playlists and just let them sit in the background and work like that. I think one of the reasons on a community level that I am so interested and really want people to use this material is that at some stage, some of those singers are going to be no longer with us. And I think I would say within the Inishowen singing community, we have lost from the 1980s, we probably have lost 2/3 of the singers that were part of the people who were documented at the very beginning. But the most important thing is those songs continue in our community because we learn from these recordings. The people are no longer there, but their memory is there. Their legacy is there because it's been recorded and been given a context. And the Inishowen Traditional Singer Circle now are working on a revamp of this project to make sure that we continue to make it relevant and accessible across media and for everyone who's interested. So I just want to, I'm actually going to, hope I'm not jumping on too long, but I just want to finish with a quick song, a few verses of it. And this is in memory of Roseanne McGonigal. And Roseanne's anniversary was yesterday. She was 1 year dead, a member of our Traditional Singer Circle with married with a wonderful family of singers. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to do a quick song. Is that okay, Cara? I am a rambling Irishman. In Ulster I was born, and many's a pleasant hour I spent all along the banks of the sweet Loch Earn. But to be poor I could not endure, like others of my station. To America I have sailed away and left this Irish nation. Tan-tan-na-na, tan-tan-na-na, right, tan-tan-na-na-na-nandy. The day before I sailed away, I spent it with my darling from 12 o'clock in the afternoon till the break of day next morning. And it's when that we were going to part, we linked each other's arms. And you can be sure and very sure it wounded both our charons. Right, tan-tan-na-na, tan-tan-na-na, right, tan-tan-na-na-randy. The very first night I slept on board, I dreamt about my Nancy. I dreamt I held her in my arms, and it's well she pleased my fancy. But when I woke up from my dream, and I find my bosom empty, oh, you can be sure and very sure that I lay discontented. Right, tan-tan-na-na, tan-tan-na-na, right, tan-tan-na-na-randy. And when we reached the other side, we were both stout and hearty. We dropped our anchor in the bay, going down to Philadelphia. So let every lass drink with her lad, blue jackets and white trousers, and let every lad drink with his lass, blue petticoats with white flounces. Tan-tan-na-na, tan-tan-na-na, right, tan-tan-na-na-randy. And Sean.
Oh, that was wonderful, Grace.
Thank you very much. And that was Roseanne from Roseanne McGonigal from the Inishowen Song Project.
We were all joining in on the refrain there. Wonderful. Thank you so much to all three of our wonderful panelists. And I think we're going to open it up to questions now. So the way this works in this webinar format is you drop your questions into the Q&A there, and then Sandra and I are going to have the fun job of trying to read them on a huge screen for you. Should we just start with this one?
Yeah.
So first question we have is from Julia Bishop, and she says, do you have an idea how widespread take-up of Roud numbers is amongst institutions featured on the PowerPoint of your presentation, and what proportion of their collections is covered by them in each case? That's an excellent question.
Definitely for Steve.
We'll turn over to Steve.
The answer is I'm working as fast as I can. I think it's varied. In England, virtually all the websites that have traditional songs on them, like the Gloss Trad and Sussex Traditions, Vaughan Williams Library, they all use my numbers, and they're pretty well embedded in the system. For Ireland, that's my current project, is that I'm really trying very hard to get them onto sites and so on. And of course, it depends on the institutions, the repositories, knowing who I am and knowing what I can offer and so on. So for the Irish ones, by the end of this year, or maybe in by 6 months' time, at least half of the collections that I know about that are online will be numbered. And I'm working closely with ITMA and University College Dublin, Mockcross House, and so on, to get them done. So certainly it's progressing. But for Wales and Scotland, it's much less, because I don't have the contacts. And it really does depend on the contact between myself and the archivists and librarians. So it's on a personal level. So if anybody wants to introduce me to anybody, please do.
Sorry, we were unmuted when we shouldn't have been, and then when we were.
Can I just say, Steve, you know, just to make a general comment, and I think the researchers from UL, we've quite a few researchers in song here at UL, and I can tell you that they're all engaging with the Roud Index, and indeed do it very, very regularly. So I'm thinking of Rosie Nicologli. I think I saw that she was online there. I know, Cara, you've interacted with it for your own research as well on hunting songs. So.
Yeah, and actually, tying in, Steve, to what you were saying about your work in Irish songs, I've been so impressed with just over the last few months. There were a couple songs I was about to email you and say, hey, you haven't got this, and then I checked and they were back in there already. So doing a wonderful job on that.
But I mean, what I'm trying to do, and of course, there is a technical difference between a catalogue and an index, which I won't bore you with. But mine is an index. It's a portal, and it's meant to answer one of the questions that I brought up at the beginning, was that the more stuff we have, the harder it is to find things, ironically. So all it boils down to is I'm trying to have one index that covers all the collections, all the sites in the whole world. Why not? So that it doesn't give you the answers, it just tells you where to go for those answers. It's just a very broad brush sledgehammer approach, but it's needed, I think.
Yeah.
Can I just say that how important it has been for, and is shown, to have the Roud Index, because I think what the Roud Index does for us, it gives a context, it takes you out of a local situation and puts your songs in the wider song community. So that, and it's really interesting to, you know, to look and trace where songs have traveled. It helps us understand where songs have traveled and come from, and has made us ask a lot of questions about singers and how they got something. How is a song, you know, that might be in the Appalachians and it's been sung and then shown a version of it as well, and it just creates that great sense of a community of song around the world. And I have to say, you know, the Roud and what Steve has done is just such an essential part. And as he said, ITMA is working closely now with Steve on, you know, how we can really embed the idea of indexing English language song, and maybe as an inspiration to the creating of an Irish language archive type approach as well, indexing approach as well. So there's great models in what Steve has done.
Yeah, and that's certainly much needed. I had a student who came to me a while back wanting to know she couldn't find the Roud index number for a song and was looking all over, and then she sends me the song and it's an Irish language song. So yeah,
but actually, again, not to be, yeah, sorry.
I can't index a song if I can't read it.
Yeah, no, that's not in your.
Even I can't.
You've done enough for us, I think, Steve. We'll have to come up with a.
Yeah, I wish Rosie was here, because Rosie's work has looked at a lot of very iconic Irish language songs, which actually her research has uncovered English language versions of them as well, and even versions in France and places. Rosie, I know you're listening, and I don't want to be paraphrasing your research, but if you want to stick in a comment in the Q&A or something, it might be nice to have that. Yeah, will we go to Martin's? There's a comment here from Martin.
Yeah, we have a comment question here from Catherine Ann Cullen, who says, for Martin, I'm wondering if it's possible that Catnap was making a joke. Oh no, I went the wrong way. Making a joke, or at least justifying the woodblock of the duck on the courtship song sheet by saying the couple ate a nice fat duck. Yeah, I wondered about that too. So I don't know, Martin, if you want to speak to that at all.
I think that is quite possible. I mean, we know that the broadside printers struggled to find illustrations for songs, though I'd have actually thought the sailor and a farmer's daughter would be relatively easy to illustrate, but there we go. He went for the duck. But he could have been, by doing that, just catching the idea that the song wasn't to be taken entirely seriously, even though we know that many of the singers did take that song very seriously. They thought it was a lovely song. I think it's a lovely song. If you read the 28 verses, and I'd be happy to send anyone a transcript of the 28 verses if they want it. It is just such a lovely ballad, and it's just a shame that no one is ever going to sing all 28 verses.
That sounds like a challenge.
I think you could do it at the conference.
Yep.
Now there's a challenge.
There it is, yeah.
Captive audience. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask Grace a kind of a more general question, if that's okay. So first of all, it was so lovely to hear the song, Grace, and to hear the connection between the archive and, artistic responses, 21st century, not just delving into the archive, but also the ongoing job of archiving. I just think that's really important. And I just resonated with so much of what you said about advocacy and collecting, kind of role of a collector. We can all be collectors so easily nowadays. It just struck me, you were talking, when all of three of you were talking actually, and maybe Grace, you could comment on this from the point of view of your work at ITMA. There are so many archives there. Like when Steve was giving his presentation, there were archives popping up behind, on the presentation there, and I was going, stop, I want to know more, because I hadn't heard of so many of them. And I think there's quite a lot of navigating, isn't there, in terms of those kind of, like finding what archives are there or what information might be there, even on the online stuff. Do you have any comment on that? I mean, how people might begin to navigate that, or how you do that even as an archive, as a working archive?
I think one of the issues about archiving and sound art, especially sound archives, is that as in Ireland we've no national policy. So in some other countries you may have a more holistic approach to the archiving of sound, but we don't have this. So things are fragmented across the island. So there are a number of ways that are being to try and bring people together. And I know Steve has been very much behind a new federation. I think Steve might like to say a few words about that. And there are various bodies and groups that have tried to group material together. But there is, I think, it also sits under the need, I would think, as well, for more dedicated approach to the art of traditional singing in Ireland, and the support that's needed to make a more cohesive policy from the Arts Council or in some way to advocate for traditional song, for its resources, and to make sense of the amount of things that are going on. There are an awful lot of individual projects and websites and things going on. And it is quite difficult for the like of ITMA to keep across it. So again, there are lots and lots of projects, but we don't have a cohesive approach to the traditional art of singing and its support in Ireland at the minute. And I think it's something that, where I love the harpers and the Ellen Pipers, it would be really nice to see song get that kind of an approach and supported in a very definite strategic way. In terms of ITMA collecting, oh my God, it's just trying to keep up with what's going on and making connections. looking for the internet and web technology to somehow help us across that. So things like, within information studies, linked data, approaches like that that will join up connections and make our searching better is one way. But there's so much still out there. We've the fabulous new project with Thomas McCarthy now out working with ITMA to collect songs among the traveller community. Wonderful projects like that. The goaling's continuing. People singing is continuing on and on. But I think we need a song policy for Ireland.
I actually agree. And just to say, on a personal level, you come across gems on county libraries,
Oh, yeah.
and you're going, oh my God, or even, the Limerick City Archives here, which people probably wouldn't normally go to initially if they were thinking of researching songs. But I know from, a number of people who've researched there, that, there's wonderful material there too, but sometimes it's in the most unlikely of places as well. It's not always in the places that, obviously ITMA, we know, is a great resource, but there's other stuff there too that can be just so rich, especially for local studies perhaps, or whatever,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think there are other questions, are there?
We nearly need an archive of archives. Steve, did you want to jump in?
Well, I've got dozens of things to say, but one of the things I wanted to say was that I agree entirely with Grace about people starting their own archive and that sort of thing. But somebody's got to keep an eye on what's being put up there, because things do not last on the internet. We think that they're forever, but especially local projects and even American universities, quite a few universities put up collections of broadsides because somebody on the staff said, oh, we've got a nice collection of broadsides, let's put them up there. And they go up there and I index them. And then 5 minutes later, computer guys say, oh, we're updating our system, and it's gone. It's literally just gone. And the same with local projects which is often a one person band. We really do have to keep an eye on things and support them and make sure they are noticed. And sometimes, record them before they're gone. And I think the big people like ITMA and UCD and Vaughan Williams Library, the permanent ones, we hope, make a bit more effort to support these smaller ones that might disappear and say, oh, well, rather than disappearing, we'll have it.
Yeah.
But just create a little corner somewhere just to keep it going.
Now that's a good point, because I'm aware of one on Clare County Library, and there's a lot of talk, oh, is it going to be left up or not? So it's
huge research.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Do you want to take some of this Q&A?
Can I just
Sorry.
come back to the point of finding, you're saying finding out things about people, Sandra, and where do you go? Well, often the answer is you trust to luck as much as anything else. Just as an example, when I was working on Marianne Mason, the female folk song collector, I needed to find more information about her. But where do you go? Because she doesn't really feature in any of the main folk song archives at all still. And it was pure serendipity that I found that her papers were in Nottingham Archive. And there we even had a typescript autobiography, unpublished. And further, another thing is sort of building on Grace's point about the fun of going to archives. If we go to a place and the opportunity presents itself, go and visit the archive. When we visited Cape Town, I knew that Marianne Mason had lived there. So one afternoon popped into the archive to see what I could find. Didn't get a great deal, but got more information about where she actually lived, and did find where she was buried, which gave us the chance to visit her grave, because we're great believers in boots on the ground folk song research, visiting the places connected with the people we're working on.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's always worthwhile, isn't it, to scope around? Yeah.
Yeah, and that point to going back again to Grace is the point of the serendipity of the archives. That's the thing. It's always a fine balance between, as Steve says, knowing exactly what you're looking for and being able to hone into it, and then also sort of leaving room to find new things you might not have known were there. I just wanted to jump in and ask Martin a question about working, because we've talked in the past about the challenges of being an academic researcher versus being an independent researcher, and sometimes I think from an independent researcher standpoint you might be having a harder time getting access to things. Do you find that, or do you want to maybe speak a little bit to the joys and challenges of being an independent researcher, a scholar at large?
It certainly makes things more difficult, no question of it. Once you get up to a certain level and you're trying to do the academic thing without being an academic, you generally, archives are pretty good. You can get into most archives nowadays without having to surrender your passport, as was the case a few years ago. University archives are still very difficult to get into, and they're in general more difficult to use. Luckily, I haven't had to tackle that problem too often. But it's when you come down to getting access to some of the online material that it gets pretty difficult, because a lot of these very useful academic sites work on a pay-per-view basis. And you have, well, I say pay-per-view, you actually have to sign up for a subscription to view them. And that's impossible for someone who is not actually associated with an institution and can get it through the institution. You can partially deal with that. Luckily, one of the little tricks of the trade is that you can join the Wellcome Institute library and you can get some access through that. But to be quite honest, the best is, since the Traditional Song Forum was formed, I've met so many people who know where this stuff is buried. And that is immensely important. And, this is a very generous community. They will share a lot of information. And Steve Roud gets at least 3 phone calls a week from me. So, it is difficult, but there is all this out there to make it more possible. And it is fun. Yes, it's fun.
Can I just say on that, sorry to be jumping in again, it's such an important conversation actually on so many different levels. And what you said there about being a generous community, Martin, I think all of us feel that. If you've been to a singing session or whatever it is, the singing community, the traditional singing communities that I've interacted with, and I know there's lots of different kinds of ones out there, but exceptionally generous, want to share, want to learn, and hold a huge amount of knowledge. And really institutions need to buck up, I think, and work on access. Access is important. I mean, it's really, really important. And I agree that universities can be the worst actually for access. So the only advice I would say from the university's point of view is, if you don't be afraid to use your contacts in these institutions. Phone somebody, email somebody, find a name and just email them directly and say, look, I need to get in, can you help me? And normally institutions can open up, but they just might put some boundaries initially to it. And the other thing is, it speaks to the whole notion of networking more generally. And then, as you said, being part of an organization or a group as a support network. And as somebody, if you can say, I'm with the Traditional Song Forum and I'm researching, whatever. Usually, in my experience now, I don't know, I hope it's true of most institutions, no matter what kind of an institution they are, they usually will go, oh yeah, okay, I recognize the worth of what you're doing, or I can see that you're serious or whatever. But it is a problem, and I think access should be looked at, particularly for collections that are, physical collections. I think really we need to be careful of that.
That's an excellent point.
Okay, so
We're getting close to the end. Do
I'd say quickly, maybe. Yeah.
quickly, maybe
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have a
Just-
couple points. Gwilym Davies has asked if Steve wanted to mention the Unlocking Our Heritage project. We have time for that briefly, Steve, or?
Yes, we do, because I can't for the moment remember what project that is.
We have taxed your capacities too much this evening.
Too many projects. For the moment, I can't remember which one that is. So sorry, Gwilym or Carol.
No worries at all. We'll close off with one. This is a really big question, so I'm going to read it off, and then we'll let anybody respond to it, whoever they want to, and then I'm going to talk just really briefly about the conference coming up, and we will let you all go. But we have a question here from John Baxter, who asks, do we lose something of the mystery by finding out song origins? I was disappointed by finding out who wrote a song. I was removing repertoires from singers who attended sessions which insisted on anonymously produced songs. That's so I don't know if anybody wants to, certainly not from my perspective, when I tend to treat that as a major win if I find what I think is an actual origin of a song, but often those are very hard to pin down. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that.
Well, I say to my female class students at the beginning, you're either a romantic or you're a historian. And they don't necessarily mix. And yes, I spent as a historian, I spend a lot of my time bursting bubbles, telling people that Ring a Ring of Roses is not about the plague, and things like that. And people get very cross. But I'm sorry, it has to be done. These songs they have to be chased to their original writers. And if you don't want to know, it would be like on the television. If you don't want to know the result, look away now. That's all I can say.
It doesn't matter to me actually in the end. I mean, I love the context might be really important, but I think it puts back a little bit to over romanticizing about what you expect traditional singers to be singing as well, because I know from singing around here, anything goes. So absolutely, it is wonderful to see the songs brought along within the tradition from older, but you've got to let the thing develop. You've got to let it have its own place in the contemporary world. So it's not to box people off too much by, but yeah, many's the bubble has been burst in at sessions when you find out it's, a country and western song or something, and somebody's really happy and nobody gives a hoot anyway, as long as it's well sung. But no, I think maybe I'm a romantic historian.
There are lots of examples of the collectors picking up songs that were written within their lifetimes and not recognizing them. And of course, the reality is that someone wrote every song that we know about. We just don't know who wrote it. It's the context that's important, and perhaps even more important is what the singers themselves thought they were singing. So I don't really have a problem with it. As long as I don't find out that it's another one written by Bert Lloyd, I'm okay. And someone wrote it. It's quite interesting if you can find the singer. I quite like doing that, and I think John has actually done some great work with his musical researches in identifying a lot of these songs in the repertoires from the 19th century.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? Sorry, because Carol Davis has just reminded me what the unlocking is. And of course, I know all about it. But basically, it's the British Library Sounds archive, and they did a very good project of some years ago on English traditional English collections, and there's thousands of songs up there. But they've recently been starting again, basically, with what I like about things like this is that it's proactive. It's not sitting there waiting for people to die and donate their stuff. It's saying there are collections out there. A lot of them are on old-fashioned tape, cassettes, and reel to reels. We should be hustling to get those identified, digitized, and so on. So that's basically it. Is it that it's the British Library doing what they should be doing, I think, and doing it well, to wake people up who have got this stuff under their beds, in their cupboards, that sort of thing. So sorry, Carol, I forgot what that was.
No, that's brilliant.
Can I just quickly jump in, because again, oh God, I'm too enthusiastic about all of this now, and I'll stop talking. But just to say, the question about whether you lose some of the mystery, I suppose that's really addressing the heart of the talk today. That there are many reasons why people access archives. So for some people, it's literally to learn new material, or to maybe source a particular singer and their repertoire, whatever the reason is, that's fine. But for some people, they really want to look at origins, or they want to look at context and meaning, and that can take so many different forms. And I suppose that's the richness of the archive, really, in a nutshell, for me anyway, that it's what you make of it as well. I mean, we can all go into an archive and gain very little, or we can go into an archive and gain so much, and we'd all get lost in archives, I think, if we had the time. I mean, I know certainly when I go online and start looking at songs and the richness that's there, let alone if you can actually get into a physical space, is phenomenal. So yeah, so anyway, I think you really brought that across today as well.
Yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm sure we could continue to go on for many more hours if we were given the option. We should probably start wrapping up now, but I did want to say, just before we leave, we do have a conference coming up, which I neglected to mention the title of when I began the whole thing. So coming up here June 3rd through 5th of 2022, hopefully in person at the Irish World Academy here in Limerick, we will be hosting a conference. I just put the link there in the chat with all of the information, and I will try to share, maybe. Don't know if this is going to work. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So there's the details. It's called As I Roved Out, Traditional Songs, Singers, and Collections of Britain, Ireland, and Beyond. We have actually extended the deadline for abstracts till January 10th. So there's still plenty of time to get in papers if you are interested. And we would love to welcome you to Limerick in any capacity, whether it's as a paper or as a visitor. I'm also just going to show you here on the website, and as I said on the link, I put the link there. There is an email here. If you want more information, we'll be sending lots of more information out. You can email me there and get on our mailing list. And we will hope to see you all in next June.
There's an option to present maybe online.
Oh, that is true. Yeah, we did say it is hopefully, fingers crossed, going to be an in-person, but there is an option to present online as well. So if you're not up for traveling to Limerick, we would still love to hear from you. So do please check that out and send me an email if you want to be kept up to date on the mailing list. And hopefully we'll see everybody in June. Yeah, so I just wanted to wrap up by thanking all of our wonderful panelists. This has been such an excellent, I've learned so much, and I think, yeah, a wonderful conversation, which hopefully we will be able to keep going in various different ways, because I think there's a lot of stuff here that could use more. And so we've talked about advocating for archives and opening up access to things. So there's certainly more work that we could be continuing to do in this area, and lots more wonderful conversations to be had. But in the meantime, thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you again to our wonderful panelists. And I wish you all a wonderful evening, or afternoon as it may be for some of you, morning, who knows. But thank you all so much.
Thank you. Well done,
Thank you very
everybody.
much.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.